put his badge on the line for justice.
You know the name Doug Poppa?
Yes, I do. God bless Doug Poppa, an honest cop.
I was elated, of course, but then as he testified, I was somewhat concerned for him, because I knew that they were probably going to crucify that man.
Sometimes the truth has a price. That may be the lesson of a Virginia police officer who says, in trying to do the right thing, he ended up paying for it.
The message you're sending is, see, we did it, Doug. You don't come out, you don't buck the system. No matter what the reason is, you just can basically keep your mouth shut. But if I wouldn't do it all over again, I would take the badge and I would leave it on somebody's desk and get out of police work. Because the day I can't tell the truth because somebody's pressuring me, and the day the system doesn't want me to tell the truth because somebody's pressuring me, is the day I'd leave the badge on the desk and walk away.
Poppa was fired for insubordination. One man who confronted truth and consequences.
From Las Vegas, Nevada, this is Doug Poppa, Truth and Consequences Podcast. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to episode 110 of the Truth and Consequences Podcast. I'm your host, Doug Poppa. It's Saturday night from Las Vegas, Nevada, 23:30 hours. The title of this podcast is gambler Brandon Sattler made some serious allegations against the president of Resorts World. And for those of you outside of Nevada who may not know, is a hotel and casino. I believe it's the largest one in the world right now, if I'm maybe correct on that. But Brandon Sattler is a gambler, high roller, we call out here in Las Vegas. Just gambles hundreds of thousands, if not more. He made some serious allegations in a deposition that he gave on April 5th of this year that I acquired. And I'm going to be talking about that in this podcast. So the focus of this podcast, like I said, is going to be on Brandon Sattler. I'll get his photo up here. That is Brandon Sattler. And you see he's wearing a shirt that says Sattler Audio and Video. And I believe, and I may address that in this podcast, that that company is now defunct, or Satcom, a company that he owned. So one of the companies doesn't exist anymore. And Mr. Sattler, who gambled at one time at Resorts World, making some serious allegations against the president of Resorts World, Scott Sibella. This gentleman over here, that's Scott Sibella. And on the bottom, the banner you could see says President Scott Sibella, Resorts World. Okay. Before I go into this podcast, and it's not, hopefully it won't be that long, I just want to focus on this because these are some serious allegations that were raised. And I don't think anybody's discussed it yet at this point in Las Vegas, Nevada. I may be wrong on that. But to put things in perspective, I'm not going to go to the whole background on Brandon Sattler. But I'll have links to the article, the portions I'm reading now, and some other articles that'll give you a history of what's going on with this guy. So this is an article that was done by John L. Smith, and he wrote this on the CDC Gaming Reports on January 12th, 2022. I'm just going to read a couple of sentences to give you some background on Mr. Sattler. And Mr. Smith says in his article that was titled, Gambler's Bankruptcy, Fraud, Lawsuit Gets Sticky. And that's the article. I have the link to this pretty good article in the comment section of this video. And when Mr. Smith goes on, he opens up and he says, high-ranking gambler Brandon Sattler continues to take big hits in U.S. bankruptcy court in Las Vegas in an ongoing fraud litigation filed by attorneys for jilted investors in his defunct Satcom Video, LLC. So that was the company, Satcom Video, LLC. And then he goes on and he says, the accusations are ugly. The plaintiffs, James Russell, Grant Witcher, and Julie Russell, allege, through attorney Mark M. Weissenmiller, that Sattler conned them into investing in Satcom Video with the claim that his company had the inside track to install hundreds of televisions in casino/resorts. The plaintiffs loaned Satcom $11 million from September 2016 to April 2018, according to court records, with Sattler personally guaranteeing repayment. And I said I'll have the full article. You'll see the link in the comment section. And I'll just read one more excerpt over here. Second page, he says, now the stakes may be climbing. This week, remember this was published January 12th of this year, this week, attorney Weissenmiller, who's the attorney for the investors who allegedly got jilted, subpoenaed Resorts World president and CEO Scott Sibella to sit for a deposition in association with this case. The subpoena does not make clear Sibella's relationship, if any, to Sattler or the litigation. A request for comment from Resorts World General Counsel and Senior Vice President of Government Affairs, Gerald Gardner, was declined. So that just gives you some background on Mr. Sattler. So what I'm going to do here, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Sattler appeared before the Nevada Gaming Control Board at their March 2nd, 2022, this year, meeting. And I'm going to play excerpts from his testimony when he's addressing the Gaming Control Board, and then we'll continue on with that. So let's play this one here. And I'm going to get me off the screen while this is going on.
Good morning. Today is Wednesday, March 2nd. This is the time and place for the regular scheduled meeting in March. Madam Secretary, has your agenda been posted before this scheduled meeting?
Yes, it has.
Today we'll be covering all the items put on our March agenda.
Okay, let me ask if there are any questions. Yeah. Do my colleagues have any questions for the other 5 members?
I don't have questions of the other 5 members, but I do have questions of Mr. Sibella.
Certainly. Mr. Sibella?
I'm not sure you gave us an affirmative presentation as to your background, and I know you're well known, but.
Okay. So I've been with Resorts World for about over 3 years. I joined the project when it was maybe 9 or 10 months under construction. Prior to that, I worked for MGM for maybe 20, 22 years. I was president of Treasure Island for 5, president of the Mirage for 5 or 6, and then president of MGM for 10 years. Prior to all that, I had a key license in Atlantic City. I worked out there in the 90s, and Mr. Trump owned it. I was brought out there with Dennis Gomes, and I was senior VP of marketing. So I've been in, and I oversee the day-to-day operations, Resorts World, and future development.
And you started out at Golden Nugget, right?
Yeah, I graduated here in high school. I graduated from UNLV, took my internship with the Golden Nugget, and started with them and worked my way up as a front desk clerk.
Oh, okay. That was my question. I was interested in knowing where you started. So
I used to be a hotel guy, and then I moved to the casino and just kept moving around.
Okay. So I did want to give you the opportunity. There have been various news reports concerning you to affirmatively address those accusations.
What I would say is, I'll be careful what I say, but there's when you decide to throw somebody out of the casino, which isn't me, they want to attack somebody. So this person was at MGM, hanging out in the mansions area with our high-end customers, causing problems, and as a whole, really corporate decided to 86 that person, and that person continues to try to attack me from there. And then when I got here, he was in the casino without me knowing, created some problems. It's under the DA now, but now he's trying to attack and create things that aren't even true. And he's if you Google him, there's a track record 3,000 pages deep of just what kind of person this is.
Okay, and you're referring to the subpoena issue?
So the subpoena issue is I guess there's a person that they're investigating on a fraud.
Bankruptcy fraud.
Yes. Well, he threw my name out there that I know this person. I met the person twice. He's been a customer for 20 years. I don't know him from Adam. He's done no work at Resorts World. So they saw that my name and they said, well, let's get Scott to maybe subpoena, maybe he knows something. They pulled it back just 2 weeks ago, saying they were wrong. They shouldn't have done it. Scott has nothing to do with this. But I don't know that person again from Adam.
So by they, you mean the attorneys?
Attorneys that filed the subpoena.
Okay, and so you have no further understanding as to why that subpoena was issued to you?
No, I think they figured that maybe this guy did work with us. I don't know what the scam was, selling TVs. He did zero work at Resorts World.
Okay.
Again, I don't even know who he is. I probably met him at the casino because he was a big customer for 20 years.
Thank you.
As you can imagine, Mr. Sibella, we are monitoring all of these actions as they go through the courts. Tell me about your compliance operations, how they're going.
Compliance is good. We're not going to do anything that doesn't fall under our compliance. We have a compliance committee. We think we hired the best people. If somebody comes in our casino that's not supposed to be there, of course, we're going to not allow them to come there. But we'd be foolish to invite people that aren't allowed to be in a casino. And all these people that you bring up, they act like they go through me. I don't know these people. I have a team that brings casino players into the property. But we've been notified by gaming on some of them. Some of them we're helping you with, and we were told to keep them there. I don't even mention the names. So there's a kind of story about these people. But the names he brings up, we don't know. And we didn't invite them there. They show up. So. Oh, I thought you meant on this guy. But we have a compliance committee. We meet weekly. We, of course, follow the rules and the guidelines. And we do everything that we have to make sure we don't break any compliance rules.
Right. And so for the record, and I think you're aware of this, we've elevated our former compliance unit director or manager, Luke Ripley, to deputy chief in investigations. That was intentional because compliance is critical to us.
Absolutely.
So I would just reiterate that for the record and for you.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Mr. Sibella, who do you report to? Mr. Lim?
Yeah, I report to Mr. Lim, just like a dotted line, Kohan, and then our deputy chief, Huey.
Okay.
Lim.
I don't have any other questions for you on your background, but I did want to have Mr. Lim come up and just hear from him as well. I understand he's been licensed before. I wasn't here previously, but I just had more global questions on his purpose. Okay.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, you heard what he said, and just to clarify some things, the first gentleman, and they didn't mention any names here, but the first gentleman, when he started talking about, he told this other guy, the first person he's talking about is another gambler named Robert J. Cipriani, who also used to gamble at Resorts World. They call him R.J. Cipriani. When they got in talking about the subpoena, and I'll explain that in a second, the gentleman he's talking about, that's what he's referring to, and so is the Gaming Commission, but they didn't name him, is Brandon Sattler, the gentleman I spoke to earlier when I did the introduction on this podcast. Now, I'm going to play an excerpt of that video, but it's the it's the portion when he's referring to Mr. Sattler, and that's Mr. Scott Sibella, who's talking to the Gaming Control Board on March 2nd, 2022. For my audio podcast people, you're listening to the Truth and Consequences podcast with Doug Poppa from Las Vegas, Nevada for April 16, 2022. The time is 23:43 hours. So this is an excerpt of the video you just saw, but to clarify things, I broke it down only when he's talking about the subpoena and the person he's talking about that you heard him say 3 times that he didn't know from Adam, and that the gentleman, meaning Sattler, never did any work at Resorts World. That's Brandon Sattler that he's talking about. So let's listen to this podcast. It's only about a minute.
Okay, and you're referring to the subpoena issue?
So the subpoena issue is I guess there's a person that they're investigating on a fraud.
Bankruptcy fraud.
Yes. Well, he threw my name out there that I know this person. I met the person twice. He's been a customer for 20 years. I don't know him from Adam. He's done no work at Resorts World. So they saw that my name, and they said, well, let's get Scott to maybe subpoena, maybe he knows something. They pulled it back just 2 weeks ago, saying they were wrong. They shouldn't have done it. Scott has nothing to do with this. But I don't know that person again from Adam.
So by they, you mean the attorneys?
Attorneys that filed the subpoena.
Okay, and so you have no further understanding as to why that subpoena was issued to you?
No, I think they figured that maybe this guy did work with us. I don't know what the scam was, selling TVs. He did zero work at Resorts World.
Okay.
Again, I don't even know who he is. I probably met him at the casino because he was a big customer for 20 years.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to basically just reiterate what he said in his own words, verbatim. But before I get to that, to put things in perspective, the subpoena that he's talking about, and I'm going to put it up on the screen here for you for a second so you could see it. Okay, let me get the banner off here. Okay, this was the subpoena. His answer to the subpoena, and it came from Gerald Gardner, who's the corporate counsel for Resorts World, and this was filed in United States Bankruptcy Court, District of Nevada, and it was entered on January 25th, 2022. And basically, through the counsel for Resorts World, Gerald Gardner, they're saying that Mr. Sibella objected to the subpoena. He didn't want to show up for it. And the reason that they give, you can see on the bottom of the screen there, just an excerpt, it says, Scott Sibella is the president of Resorts World Las Vegas, LLC, a Las Vegas resort and casino, and knows of debtor/defendant only as a former customer. So they're saying here, just like you heard Mrs. Sibella testify in front of the Gaming Control Board on March 2nd of this year, that he only knew Brandon Sattler as a customer. Okay, and then it goes on, the last sentence there that I've highlighted, it says Scott Sibella has no personal or business relationship with debtor-defendant. And the debtor-defendant that they wanted Scott Sibella to testify at the bankruptcy, in this case, is Brandon Sattler, who's basically, like I said, allegedly defrauded the investors, and that's what this whole thing's about, this bankruptcy fraud case and all that. So you're saying again, right here, is that the attorney for Resorts World is telling the court when they file this paperwork that there's no need for Mrs. Sibella to show up for a deposition because he's objecting to the subpoena because he doesn't even know Brandon Sattler. So get rid of that one. Put me up over here. Get rid of that box. Okay. So took care of that. Now, let's go over, because this is going to be pertinent to what I'm going to read next. Let's go over, and this is what Mr. Scott Sibella testified to that you just heard him in front of the Game Control Board, like I said, on Wednesday, March 2nd. And these are his words, not mine. The subpoena issue is I guess there's a person that they're investigating on a fraud. The person, like I said, he's talking about is Brandon Sattler. Well, when he refers to is referring to Robert Cipriani, Audrey Cipriani, threw my name out there that I know this person. So he's saying that Cipriani threw Sibella's name out, saying that he knew Brandon Sattler. And he goes on, I met the person twice. He's been a customer for 20 years. So he's saying he only met him twice. Then the first time he says this, I don't know him from Adam. Then he goes on, he's done no work at Resorts World, meaning Brandon Sattler. So they saw my name and they said, let's get Scott subpoenaed. Maybe he knows something. They pulled it back just 2 weeks ago. he's talking about that they pulled the subpoena back 2 weeks ago. Remember, this testimony he's given in front of the commission was on March 2nd, okay? So he says they pulled it back just 2 weeks ago, saying they are wrong. They shouldn't have done it. Scott has nothing to do with this, but I don't know that person from Adam. So he's basically saying that the attorneys who are on the bankruptcy fraud against Brandon Sattler for the investors made a mistake, and they pulled the subpoena back for him to testify under deposition, and that's what he's saying. And that, and then he says because he has nothing to do with the case, and then the second time, but I don't know that person from Adam. Again, second time he's saying he doesn't know the person from Adam. He's referring to Brandon Sattler. Then he went on, and you heard him say, I think they figured that this guy did work for us, meaning Brandon Sattler. What the scam was selling TVs. And then again he says, second time, he did zero work at Resorts World. I don't know who he is, for the third time. So the third time he's saying to the commission, he does not know who Brandon Sattler is. And then he says, I probably met him at the casino because he was a big customer for 20 years. Okay? I'm going to get back to something in that in a second. So what I'm going to do now, ladies and gentlemen, when I start talking, like I said, I acquired this deposition. It's about 200 pages long. And I did screenshot excerpts of only when they're talking about Scott Sibella's name is coming up in reference to Mr. Sattler and Resorts World. So it'll be going across the screen. It'll be looping as I'm talking. And then I made some blow-up shots. Now, if you want to read, because they're going to go like 3 seconds on each page, they'll be looping. So I suggest if you want to read these excerpts from the lawsuit, not the lawsuit, from the deposition, on April 5th, that Brandon Sattler gave under penalty of perjury. He was sworn in when he gave this deposition, and he did it through Zoom. It was a remote video because now they're doing everything through Zoom. And that happened on April 5th of this year. And so if you want to see and read these screenshots, if they're going too fast, after you watch the whole video, you can just go back and freeze frame and blow things up if you want to read it. But for the purpose of the podcast, to keep things going, it'll be looping every page that I got on the screen for about 3 seconds. So let's get this going over here. Okay. I'm gonna let it run. So I'm not going to put the picture-in-picture in yet because when you go back, it'll block some stuff. So I'm just going to let this run, and then I'm going to start reading from the. This is the what's on the screen now is the transcription of was recorded, the deposition of Brandon Sattler on April 5th of 2022, and you can see the date up at the top. And I'm going to start reading now. And they're talking to him. It starts out, they're talking about alleged work that he was doing at the Resorts World. So when he says, and there was people there from Resorts World, including Scott Sibella and other people. During the course of this job work, I interacted with Scott Sibella and other people from Resorts World. And I was told by Sibella, among others, I've known Sibella 20 plus years now. I was told from him and from a few other people that Resorts World is a 50% partner in Tacos El Carbon, because I always wondered why they were fighting back and forth all the time. And then it was told to me by everybody pretty much that Tacos El Carbon is 50-50 with Resorts World and they're 50-50 partners. Just to give you some background here. And I'll put a lot of excerpts, and I'll put a lot of links to stories that'll clarify a lot of this. But basically, from what I got from this, from looking into it, is there's allegations that the Tacos El Carbon vendor, that's at the Resorts World to this day, I believe, there's allegations that there may be silent partners, or the Resorts World or some executives may be partners with that vendor. And from what I know, I've been out of the gaming business for 10 years. I was a director at 2 different properties. I did background investigations for vendors on compliance. And if that's the case, that could be a conflict. But I said, that's just the allegation that I'm hearing. So anyway, I'll continue. So now the attorney, when I say question, that's the attorney, Mark, and I mentioned his name before. Let me get back in here and I'll say it once so I can get it straight. The attorney's name that's asking the questions and doing the deposition is for the plaintiffs, James Russell, Grant Witcher, and Julie Russell, and the attorney is Mark M. Weissenmiller. So when I say question, that's Mr. Weissenmiller asking Brandon Sattler a question. So here's the first question on one of the screenshots. And Mr. Sattler, have you spoken to Scott Sibella about the subpoena? Answer, I have not. Question by the attorney. And you testified that you've known Scott for over 20 years, right? Answer, yes. Okay, this thing's been going enough on the screen where you can freeze shot it later, and I'll keep it going, but I'll put my, hang on a second, my box over here so you can see me as I'm talking. Okay, so the question, like I said, and you testified that you've known Scott for over 20 years, right? Answer by Sattler, yes. I first met Scott either at Treasure Island or Mirage when he was running the property, and I was a big gambler there, and we interacted a lot, but we interacted more and became more friendly when he was at MGM Grand. You know, remember, prior to going to Resorts World, Scott Sibella was the president of MGM Resorts International, I believe. That was his title. Question from the attorney. How would you describe your relationship with Scott? Friends? Acquaintances? Answer by Brandon Sattler. Up until we parted ways in 2014, we were very friendly with each other. Dinners and going out and stuff. But I got kicked out of MGM Properties December 14th, 1st of 2014. So I ran into Scott Sibella shortly thereafter. I got 86th. And for people who don't know, when they refer to 86 in Nevada, that means you were trespassed from a property. They don't want you back. So he says, I ran into him shortly after I got 86th. And Tim and I were drinking and gambling down at the downtown Grand Hotel. And his then mistress, or whatever the girl was, and I asked her, and he goes, I'll check into it. So what he's saying was he met Scott Sibella at the Grand Hotel, and he said, he was trespassed, and he's saying that, this is what he's alleging, that Scott Sibella said he'll check into why he was 86th. Then he goes on, Brandon Sattler, and he says, this is in the deposition. So we drank and gambled and hung out. And then a couple of weeks later, we talked again, and he said there was nothing he can do. He explained it to me, which was a different explanation than I got from other people there. So he's saying that Scott Sibella told him there's nothing he can do about him getting 86th from I guess at this time was MGM. And then he says, he continues, and then I really didn't associate with him at all. I never called him or texted him. I just would run into him at the Palms, drinking and gambling at the Grand and the Red Rock. So we just associated as drinkers and gamblers for the years to come. And then a few years went by that I didn't see or talk to him until I think it was 2019, October or November of 2019. I ran into him at the steakhouse at the Palms. He was at the bar by himself drinking. I sat down next to him and ate dinner together. And again, I just walked in, ran into him. We sat down, we talked, we ate dinner. We talked about girls and gambling and everything else, and then that was it. Okay, while I'm talking here, I'm going to change the screen. I'm going to put in some of the blow-up shots, mostly when he's talking about Scott Sibella. So, that's number 6. Get these things going here. It going to take me off the screen for a minute so you can see these shots. You can freeze frame them later on, and then I'll get me back up on the screen, and then I'll continue to talk. And these are just blow-up shots from the screenshots that I have on the screen. But basically, they refer to when he's talking about some of the important stuff about Scott Sibella. Some of it I'll be getting to here shortly. So as soon as it clears the last slide, I'll put my picture-in-picture up in the box and keep those things playing. Again, like I said, you can freeze frame these things later on the screen if you want to read them. Okay, so I'm going to get back over here. Okay, so he goes on and he says, and then a few years went by that I didn't see or talk to him until I think it was 2019, October or November of 2019. I ran into him at the steakhouse at the Palms. He was at the bar by himself drinking. I sat down next to him and I ate dinner together. And again, I just walked in, ran into him. We sat down, we talked, we ate dinner. We talked about girls and gambling and everything else. And then that was it. That night went on. I didn't see or talk to him again until Resorts World. One day I was with my guys working there at Resorts World, and he was there with people from Resorts World and Tacos El Caban, and I went up and I said hello, and we bullshitted for a few minutes. And then a month or two later, I was eating dinner at one of their other restaurants with some other people, and he walked up to the restaurant and said hello to me and shook my hand. And then I think the only other interactions I had with him was at this tournament at Resorts World. He was at the bar drinking, and I walked up and talked to him about Tacos El Caban. We did some shots together. He bought us, meaning me and Katie and Marty, Mark Mizrahi, a couple of rounds of drinks, and we sat there and we bullshitted about the late opening of Tacos El Caban, and that's about it. The rest of the interactions with him are third party through R.J. Cipriani. Question from the attorney. Okay, so is it fair to describe him as a friend of yours? Answer. Brandon Sattler answers. I would say he's an acquaintance, just because, you know, Mark, I told you that I wanted to talk about this. I wanted to take it slow. I want to make sure we get everything factual based on the record, because Scott Sibella defamed and slandered me, and he lied to the Gaming Control Board. And he completed multiple felonies by doing so. I want to make sure. I consider him an acquaintance. Now, if you ask me prior to November 30th of 2014, I would say yes, he's a friend. Yes, we've partied. Yes, we did drugs together. Drank together. Yes, we went out to eat together. Repeat that segment again here. Now, if you ask me prior to November 30th of 2014, I would say yes, he's a friend. Yes, we've partied. Yes, we did drugs together. Drank together. Yes, we went out to eat together. Yes, we probably had sex with multiple women at the same time. We did a lot of different things together. But after that point, I'd say we were just acquaintances. Let me read that sentence again. This is Brandon Sattler. He's saying that this about Resorts World President Scott Sibella. Yes, we probably had sex with multiple women at the same time. We did a lot of different things together. But after that point, I'd say we were just acquaintances. With Sibella and Krakenberger, were they bad-mouthing me and talked about me negatively behind my back? So, when I came to find out those things, I had no reason to ever talk to him again, and I called Gardner on other, and he's talking about Gerald Gardner. Now, in this transcript, they're referring to Gerald Gardner as Joe Gardner, and I think that's because when you're talking with the recording, Joe sounds like Gerald, but Gardner is the attorney for Resorts World. So he goes, and I called Gardner on other. I called Gardner on other reasons regarding R.J. Cipriani and other reasons, and then I received a subpoena. And so that was brought up in the conversation very casually and lightly, and basically we both agreed that there's no reason Scott should be subpoenaed because there's been no interaction with him other than the 2 or 3 visits that we talked and the round of drinks that we had or the couple of round of shots at the club that night up on the 66th floor. Question from the attorney. Okay, thank you. And so you testified that Scott lied at the Gaming Control Board? Answer. Oh, absolutely 100%. I have the video on my phone. As a matter of fact, I watched it at lunchtime. I was hoping we were going to talk about it. He said, and I quote, I don't know him from Adam. Oh, really? Okay, so he's a liar. He lied to save his own ass. And I believe he's referring there, ladies and gentlemen, to, you just heard the testimony of Mr. Sibella, and I said 3 times he said to the commission he didn't know Mr. Sattler from Adam, and that's what he's referring to here, Brandon Sattler. Then he goes on in the deposition, he says, and I'm going to talk to press and give them more information because they're asking me a lot of questions about Jim Russell and Grant Witcher, their businesses, and I know some personal dealings about Jim Russell that him and Grant have had regarding some confidential things, and they want me to give a full story on the bankruptcy and also the Scott Sibella stuff and some other things, so I'm preparing to do so. Ladies and gentlemen, just to make context here, when he's talking about Jim Russell and Grant Witcher, those are the people that are claiming that he, built them out of, defrauded them, whatever you want to use, of $11 million as an investors in the Satcom company that Mrs. Sattler owned. Then he goes on, he says, and in that, I'm going to provide documents of what I can provide. And part of that's going to be with my opinion that all of a sudden, Scott Sibella's subpoena goes away and he lied to the Gaming Control Board and it gets swept under the rug. So I think whether I'm right or wrong, that maybe Scott bribed you guys or Jim or Grant or somebody with promo chips or who knows what. He's a very rich and powerful man. And something doesn't make sense why he would squash a subpoena just like that. But I'm not an attorney. I don't know what you guys were doing. Then the attorney asks him a question, and he says, was there anything else that Mrs. Sibella testified to at the gaming control meeting that was untruthful? And Brandon Sattler replies in the deposition, well, he said he didn't know me. He said that he's just some gambler that he's run into a couple of times over the 20 years. That's another lie. He said that I tried to scam them for TVs or sell them scam TVs or something. That's a lie. So those are, probably 6 or 7 lies. And then the Gaming Control Board gave him a license anyways. He said he has never interacted with me or anything like that. Those are all lies. He blatantly lied to the Gaming Control Board and to their investigators to obtain a gaming license. And hopefully the truth comes out here really soon. Question by the attorney. Okay, when was the last time you talked to Gardner? And Gardner is the attorney for Resorts World. Answer. I don't know if it was early to mid-January or late January or early February. I believe it was mid to late January. Remember, this deposition is taking place on April 5th of this year, 2022. Then the attorney asked him another question. And when is the last time you recall speaking to Scott Sibella? Answer. That was Resorts World. It was a tournament. And I want to say it was September or October. It was on the 66th floor at the bar. I was with Katie and Marty, and we were all at the bar. Scott was there. And I walked up to him, and we hung out and talked and interacted for almost an hour. So you can imagine my surprise when R.J. Cipriani sent me the videos from the Gaming Control Board and when multiple reporters called me. And now regarding we should file a slander suit, Jim and I against Sibella, and he can keep all the money, but he's got to pay the legal fees. So, I was going to volunteer this information to the Gaming Control Board to prove that Scott Sibella lied about a lot of things and should have never been licensed. So that's why I wanted to discuss that with you. Okay, let me get one more thing going here. Okay. And then question from the attorney, and he says, yeah, well, let me just make one representation to you, and you can see this from the docket. We haven't abandoned the subpoena. We just vacated the deposition until I got other evidence from you and other parties. And so, to the extent that I need to go back and request more documents, Mr. Sibella, or set his deposition or the deposition of somebody at Resorts World, that is certainly still open. Okay, let me get back up on the screen here. Okay, so according to what Mark Weissenmiller is telling Brandon Sattler on April 5th, that the deposition for Mr. Sattler hasn't been squashed, that he may still subpoena him at another date, and this was April 5th, which kind of conflicts with what Mr. Sibella told the Gaming Commission that that Scott has nothing to do with it, but I don't know the reason from Adam. And he says that basically saying that they are wrong, they shouldn't have done it, meaning send Sibella the subpoena to be subpoenaed for a deposition. So, and now the attorney for the investors is telling Brandon Sattler that they didn't squash any subpoena. He's saying to the extent that they need to go back and request more documents, Mr. Sibella or set his deposition or the deposition of somebody at the Resorts World, that is certainly still open. So the deposition for Sibella may still be open. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, let me get this, again, when this deposition was taken, and this is on one of the screenshots, it's the last large screenshot on the screen, it is the notary public that signed this, not the notary public, the woman that was doing the transcription. And she says, it's dated April 5th, as you can see from the screenshots when you go back and look at them. It says, I, Nicole J. Hansen, certified court reporter, State of Nevada, do hereby certify that prior to being examined, the witness in this foregoing remote proceedings was by me duly sworn to testify to the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Signed, Nicole J. Hansen, and she dated this April 8th, 2022, 3 days after she did the transcription, I guess, of the recorded deposition. So, ladies and gentlemen, I worked in the casino business for 20 years. I was an investigator for MGM back in the 90s. I ran director of security and surveillance for 2 properties, the last one being the now gone Riviera Hotel and Casino. And I can tell you, like I said, I've been out of the business for 10 years, that compliance with gaming regulations is extremely, extremely important, and there's laws governing it in the Nevada Revised Statutes. That's why there's a Gaming Control Board and an Enforcement Division. So what we have here, ladies and gentlemen, is we have a problem, okay? 2 people cannot be telling the truth on this. Mr. Scott Sibella, the president of Resorts World, testified in front of the Gaming Control Board, and we heard him say, to go back to use his own words, I don't want to put words in anybody's mouth, I don't know him from Adam, meaning Brandon Sattler. 3 times he said that. I don't know him from Adam. Twice he said that Brandon Sattler, he's done no work at Resorts World. And you just heard Mr. Sattler testify that he was doing some work there, installing some TVs, whether it was Tacos El Caban or some other place. So we have a problem here. Who's telling the truth? Is Brandon Sattler lying against Scott Sibella? Or is he telling the truth and Scott Sibella didn't tell the truth to the Gaming Commission and their investigators because he was being investigated by the agents of the Nevada Gaming Control Board Enforcement Division because he was going to be licensed as a key executive for Resorts World. And they did license him, just like Mr. Sattler said. He is licensed as a key executive of Resorts World. He's the president of Resorts World, okay? So 2 people cannot be telling the truth here. You got serious allegations made by Mr. Sattler, not just that he's known him and he was friends with him even prior to 2014, but prior to 2014, he partied with him. He did drugs with Scott Sibella. They engaged in sex with multiple women. They partied. So these are serious allegations. And the Nevada Gaming Control Board, ladies and gentlemen, like I said, I was in that business for 20 years. They have no choice at this point but to reinvestigate both Mr. Sibella's background on this and the allegations made against Mr. Sibella by Brandon Sattler. Because like I said, 2 people cannot be telling the truth on this. It's freaking impossible. So if indeed, and we don't know, Mr. Sattler could be an all-out liar. Maybe he's pissed off at Mrs. Sibella because he was wasn't allowed at Resorts World. He was playing there, and they got him out of there, whatever that case may be. And I said, I'll have links to stories that other people wrote that did this in more in depth than this one podcast that I'm doing. But I did this podcast because this piqued my attention, because I said I was in the gaming business as a director, and this is a serious matter right now. Remember, this deposition, I don't think anybody has got it yet. This is an exclusive to Truth and Consequences podcast. This is my digital forum, like I've been saying for months, for my independent investigative journalism. So, big problem, ladies and gentlemen. If Scott Sibella lied to the Gaming Commission about knowing Mr. Brandon Sattler personally, because he said he did not, he only knew him as a customer, met him once or twice, not only is he putting his license in jeopardy to be a key executive of any property, but because he's the president of Resorts World, he's putting the company's license in jeopardy. But that's not for me to determine, and that's not up for you to determine. Who's going to determine and get to the bottom of this is the Nevada Gaming Control Board. They have no choice now. They have to conduct an investigation and find out who is telling the truth here. And they have special agents of the Gaming Control Board Enforcement Division that will do this. Because, like I said, if Mr. Sibella is lying, then he's in some serious trouble. Not only will he lose his license as a key executive, but he's putting Resorts World in jeopardy also. And if he's telling the truth, and Mr. Brandon Sattler's lying, and that comes out in the investigation, then I think Mr. Sibella is going to have one major lawsuit against Brandon Sattler. So that's all I could say on this. It's interesting. There's a lot of other aspects of this, of this Cipriani guy that other people have done stories on and stuff, but I'll have excerpts of those, links to those stories that were done by other journalists in Las Vegas. So, ladies and gentlemen, it's 16 minutes after midnight. We just turned into April 17th, 2022. Remember, subscribe to my YouTube channel, Truth and Consequences Podcast. It's on YouTube. That's my channel. That's my forum for my independent investigative journalism. If you're not subscribed, subscribe. If you can, support my independent investigative journalism at paypal.me/Doug Poppa. I know times are tough. If you can't, donate, put money in my PayPal account, that's fine. At least subscribe to my channel. And my audio podcast are available on, like I keep saying, Spotify, iHeart's a big one. Some of the older ones are on Spreaker. I'm on Radio Public, Google Podcast. Continue to listen to me. I have much more stuff coming out. Stories on the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department, Sheriff Joe Lombardo, former Undersheriff Kevin McMahill, who's running for sheriff, the unsolved Land Kaufman double homicide. A ton of stories be coming out in the next couple of months because we have the 5th year anniversary of the 2017 Las Vegas massacre, and the 5-year anniversary is coming up in October. The Land Kaufman murders, that case is filled with allegations, like I said, corruption, misconduct. Anybody's followed my work for years, you know I've been on that for over 3 years. The 6th year anniversary of those unsolved murders is at the end of October. So there's a lot of stuff coming out. I just want to make sure that I hit on everything I wanted to do on this podcast on this. Like I said, I this is serious because I was in the gaming business, and even with these, there's a lot of allegations that I've been reading in the newspapers about vendors and different people over that have companies over at Resorts World that may be silent partners and all that type of stuff. That also needs to be looked at because at least things when I was in the business, and like I said, I did vendor background investigations, and at least it was when I was there 10 years ago, executives from the company, if they're silent partners into vendors that are in place at the property, that never was permitted. That is a conflict. The background of some of the people who play at these casinos, if they're known criminals, we wouldn't allow it when I was at the Riviera. But anyway, that's all the stuff that's going on in the periphery of this case. But the important thing for this case is this. We have 2 people giving 2 different stories on this. And like I said, you don't have to be an investigator to figure out both of these men cannot be telling the truth. Somebody's lying. It's either Mr. Scott Sibella or it's Mr. Brandon Sattler. And hopefully the Gaming Control Board will look into this and get to the bottom of it, because I think this is going to end up being a pretty big story when other people get a hold of this. Like I said, I got a hold of that deposition and the transcription of the deposition, and it piqued my interest, and I was reading the story from John Smith and some other people that were writing. So anyway, we're at 50 minutes. I'm going to go ahead and end this podcast from the desert of Las Vegas, Nevada. That's the way it is. April 17th, 2022, 00:19 hours. Thanks for listening, folks, and stay tuned for much more.